It was a peaceful morning over Earth, the kind that felt like the galaxy itself had finally learned to breathe. The skies above were calm, with only the soft hum of patrol drones passing overhead, while on the ground, cities buzzed gently with life. For most people, this day was like any other in this new era of peace, one earned through centuries of struggle, loss, and growth. After joining the Galactic Union, humanity had taken a quieter path, leaving behind its reputation for war and choosing diplomacy, exploration, and healing. Floating silently above the planet, the space-bound shelter known as Haven 9 shimmered in the sunlight. It was more than just a home, it was a symbol. Designed to care for children who had lost their families in old conflicts, it was a place filled with laughter, learning, and love. It orbited peacefully above the world that had once been scarred by war, now turned into a beacon of hope. Inside, dozens of children orphans from battles long past played in zero-gravity gardens, painted glowing murals on the walls, and listened to stories told by their robotic caretakers. These children had no weapons, no hate, and no idea that anyone in the stars still viewed them as enemies. Far away, across systems untouched by compassion, the Varnock Coalition watched silently. They were new to the Galactic Union but refused to accept humanity's growth. To them, humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and too forgiving. The Varnock believed fear was power, and peace was weakness. They had seen humanity's orphan station and found in it no inspiration, only an opportunity. In their war councils, they made a decision that would change everything. They chose not to strike Earth's armies, not its fleets, nor its leaders. Instead, they would target the heart of what made humans human. They would bomb Haven 9. It was an unarmed civilian station, full of children, protected only by honor and law. But the Varnock did not care for laws made by weak species. They wanted to prove that no one, not even humans, could stand against their kind. So in silence, they launched a single warhead. It was cloaked, fast, and precise. No signal. No warning. At the same moment, on Haven 9, young May, barely 10 years old, floated near a wide glass window. Her eyes sparkled as she traced the movement of Earth below with her finger, her thoughts innocent and free. Beside her, her friend Jalen pointed out a passing comet, and both of them laughed, unaware of what was coming. The robotic caretaker nearby hummed a gentle tune, updating a story it was preparing to tell for bedtime. It would never get the chance to begin. Far above the planet, in the black of space, something moved silent, swift, and final. The warhead pierced the thin shield of Haven 9 like a needle through silk. It didn't explode immediately. Instead, it buried itself deep into the core of the station before unleashing a blinding flash of light. The explosion was monstrous, tearing the station apart in an instant. No alarms, no time to escape, just sudden, total silence. From the surface of Earth, many saw the flash in the sky, thinking it was a solar flare or perhaps some test. But when communications with Haven 9 failed, when no child responded, when all screens turned black and quiet, reality set in. The screams came not from the victims, but from the people left behind. Parents who had once dreamed of adopting those children broke down. Scientists who had helped build the shelter fell to their knees. Soldiers, long retired, stared at the sky in disbelief. Across Earth, a deep chill spread not of fear, but of something far more dangerous, a gathering storm of grief that would soon turn into something else. In the halls of the Earth Defense Command, alarms blared not for an incoming enemy, but for the realization of what had just been lost. Images began to spread, pixelated remains of the station, silent footage showing the last moments before the light. Social networks exploded. News anchors wept on live feeds. The children of Haven 9 were gone, not by accident, not by natural cause, but by a calculated, brutal act of war. Yet in all the chaos, there was one thing missing: rage. Not yet. Instead, there was silence. A deep, dangerous silence. The kind that comes before a storm. Leaders gathered without words. Old warships, once turned into museums, were quietly reactivated. Pilots received silent messages, coordinates, missions, targets. Humanity, once known for shouting back at threats, didn't shout this time. They prepared. In the heart of Earth's command center, Admiral Kira Thorne watched the broken feed from Haven 9, her hand clenched so tightly it bled. She didn't speak to the media. She didn't issue a warning. She looked directly into the main camera and said only 2 words, broadcast across every channel, screen, and ship: "We respond." And in that moment, the galaxy felt something shift. Peace had ended not because humanity wanted war, but because someone had dared to awaken what lay sleeping beneath their skin. The ones who bombed Earth's orphans had not destroyed hope. They had only set fire to something far more dangerous: humanity's fury. The galaxy did not speak at first. After the destruction of Haven 9, a silence spread like a slow poison through every known system, station, and Senate chamber. Civilizations that once celebrated peace suddenly fell quiet, watching their screens, unsure of what to say or what to expect. Messages were sent between empires and species, not with voices of protest or sorrow, but with short, frightened whispers. Did you see? It was real. They bombed the children. Even those who never cared for humans, those who had once feared them, envied them, or simply ignored them, felt something strange in their hearts that day. It was not grief. It was a deep, cold sense of dread. Everyone in the galaxy knew that humans had changed over the last 100 years. They had put away their weapons, reached out with hands instead of fists, and helped rebuild countless worlds. They became diplomats, healers, and explorers. But there were still stories, old stories about what humans were like in the days before peace. Stories about how they fought when cornered, how they united when wronged. And now, as the burned remains of Haven 9 floated in silence, those stories returned, not as legends, but as warnings. I and the Great Galactic Council, representatives from 100 species, sat frozen. No one dared speak first. The Varnock ambassador was absent. Of course, his race had gone silent since the attack. No messages, no apologies, no explanations. Just silence, as if they believed that fear alone would protect them. But what they didn't understand was that humanity didn't fear silence, they listened to it. And when humans listen, they prepare. On Earth, there were no marches or violent riots, no angry speeches or demands. Instead, people worked quietly. Shipyards reopened overnight, glowing with activity. Factories that once built farming machines now forged armor, weapons, and engines. Civilian engineers turned their skills to warcraft design, bringing blueprints older than themselves back to life. Retired soldiers returned to their old posts without being called. Pilots volunteered in silence. Scientists who had spent years creating peaceful technologies unlocked sealed projects they had promised never to use. Artificial intelligence cores, banned for being too dangerous, were activated under emergency orders. Earth itself was transforming slowly, surely, and without a word. The galaxy watched in disbelief. Satellites caught strange movements in deep space. Human dreadnoughts, once museum relics, were towed back into orbit for refitting. Colonies sent resources not for trade but for war. And yet, through it all, no official declaration came. No threats. No revenge speeches. Just quiet preparation. The kind of silence that was more terrifying than any war cry. The humans were not seeking justice in the courts, nor waiting for the Galactic Council to act. They had already made their decision, and the entire galaxy knew it. Admiral Kira Thorne had not spoken again since her 2-word message, but her face was everywhere. In every outpost and command center, in every hangar and barracks, her image stood like a shadow behind every order. "We respond" had become more than words. It was a movement, a promise, a thunderstorm waiting to strike. In deep space, far from any known star, a listening station owned by the neutral race known as the Ulari detected something unusual. One of the Varnock's outposts had gone completely dark. No life signs, no distress calls. Just silence, followed by static. The Ulari, known for being peaceful observers, decided not to report it. They didn't want to be involved. But inside their minds, they knew what had happened. It had begun. Humanity was no longer waiting for approval. They had started their answer, and it would not be stopped. Across the galaxy, traders, diplomats, and travelers began to change routes. Planets that once welcomed Varnock ships now turned them away, afraid to be seen supporting the attackers. Former enemies of humanity stayed low, hoping not to be mistaken for allies of the coalition. People were not choosing sides for moral reasons, they were choosing survival. And survival meant staying out of humanity's way. Even in distant parts of the galaxy, where news arrived late, the tale of Haven 9 spread quickly. Artists painted its last known image on walls. Children learned its story in schools. It became a symbol, not of weakness, but of warning. The message was simple. If the galaxy allows such cruelty to pass without consequence, then they should all be ready to face what comes next. And what was coming was human fury, shaped by grief and sharpened by silence. The Varnock had expected panic. They had expected a loud, emotional reaction, a desperate plea for mercy. What they got instead was preparation, unity, and resolve. For the first time, they began to fear not just Earth's weapons, but its patience. Because patience meant planning, and planning meant precision. Inside the hidden war chambers of Earth's defense network, commanders met in private, drawing lines across star charts and assigning missions without pause. A list was being made. It wasn't made of targets, but names the Varnock leaders responsible for the bombing. Their faces, their locations, their schedules. Each name was marked with one word, confirmed. Earth would not destroy the innocent. They would not target civilians or colonies that had nothing to do with the crime. But those who gave the order, those who celebrated the death of children, would not survive. Quietly, the first fleet was launched. It had no banners, no fanfare. Its engines flared to life in the darkness, and then it disappeared beyond the edge of known space. And still, the galaxy watched. Some hoped humanity would stop after a single strike. Others prayed they would go all the way and bring the Varnock to their knees. But no one, not even the most powerful empires, dared to interfere. The humans were not just angry, they were focused. And that was the scariest kind of enemy to face. Because an angry fighter might make mistakes, might shout and stumble. But a silent one, was always thinking, always moving, always ready. The silence in the galaxy now held a new meaning. It was no longer just shock. It was respect. It was fear. It was the understanding that something had been broken, and something older, something stronger, had awakened in its place. And in every corner of space, as stars continued to burn and planets continued to spin, one thought echoed in every mind, unspoken but undeniable: the humans are coming. The stars above the Varnock border station pulsed in the darkness like cold eyes, unblinking and distant, unaware of what was coming. Deep in the silence of space, hidden by cloaking fields and layers of artificial fog, the human fleet arrived without sound, without announcement. No broadcasts, no signals, no demands. It moved like a shadow stretching across the stars, unseen until it was far too late. The Varnock stationed at Outpost Dezuran 5 were relaxed, unaware of the storm that had been born on Earth. They had no reason to expect trouble. After all, they had not been warned. Their commanders had told them the bombing of Haven 9 was a necessary action, a message to remind the galaxy of Varnock's strength. But the galaxy had not answered them, the humans had. And now, their answer had arrived in the form of sleek, black warships covered in armor that shimmered like oil and death. The first strike was not loud. It was quick, precise, and horrifyingly effective. Before the Varnock even knew they were under attack, their comms were jammed, their surveillance satellites were blinded, and their defense systems fell silent. Then came the breach. Human drop teams, silent and efficient, landed on the outpost with ghost-like precision. They didn't fire wildly or shout command. They didn't waste a single second. Every squad knew exactly where to go, who to target, and what to disable. It was not a battle. It was an execution, carefully planned and perfectly timed. The Varnock soldiers who fought back never had a chance. They were trained for traditional warfare, for grand speeches and predictable charges. But what they faced now was a force that had trained in secret, studied every weakness, and moved with one goal: justice. Inside the control chamber, Commander V. Rex of the Varnock tried to escape through a hidden tunnel, but a single human soldier was already waiting at the exit. The moment their eyes met, the Varnock felt something he had never felt in his long military career: pure, cold fear. This human didn't scream or taunt him. He didn't speak at all. He simply raised his weapon and delivered judgment. Across the outpost, the story repeated. No unnecessary deaths, no collateral damage, no civilians harmed. Just the targets. The ones who had helped plan the bombing. The ones who had smiled as Haven 9 burned. By the time the human fleet vanished into the stars once again, the outpost was gone, not destroyed, but cleaned. Every responsible officer had been eliminated. The structure itself was still there, untouched, left as a message. News of the attack spread quickly, even though Earth made no official statement. The footage was leaked not by humans, but by nearby neutral observers who picked up the signatures. The galaxy saw the speed, the silence, the precision. And with that, fear deepened. This was not war, it was something older. Something personal. Something unstoppable. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting, and for the first time in decades, every seat was filled. Even the races that had ignored past conflicts showed up, curious and afraid. Earth's representative didn't attend. They didn't need to. The message was already clear. This was just the beginning. Back on Earth, the mood remained quiet. There were no celebrations, no cheering crowds. The people knew this wasn't a victory. It was a necessary response. Every name on the list was still being tracked. Every fleet was still being prepared. The first retaliation had been only a whisper of what was to come. And yet, it had shaken the entire galactic order. The Varnock Council, hidden in their crystal towers on the cold planet of Virex Prime, held emergency discussions behind closed doors. Some wanted to launch a counterattack, to show strength and not appear weak. Others wanted to send diplomats to beg for peace while they still could. But none of them knew how to speak to the humans now. They had expected fury, yes, but not this kind. Not this silence that felt like a blade against their throats. Admiral Kira Thorne stood alone in her command chamber, her eyes scanning the star map glowing on the screen before her. She didn't speak much these days, and she didn't need to. Her orders flowed like water through the chain of command. Her officers moved like parts of one great machine, driven by the same memory, the same wound, the same goal. Haven 9 had not been forgotten. It had been burned into every heart, into every system, every line of code, every weapon now aimed at the stars. The retaliation had begun, and with it came a silent promise. For every innocent lost, justice would fall like fire from above. The galaxy trembled, not because of the damage done, but because of the way it had been done. Quietly. Perfectly. Without asking for approval. Empires that had once viewed humans as naive or soft now reassessed their maps, their alliances, their entire strategies. Because the truth had become clear, humanity was not a sleeping lion. It was a wounded one. And when a wounded lion rises, nothing stands in its path for long. More names were added to the list. More fleets moved into position. More plans were set into motion. And through it all, humanity said nothing. They let their silence speak, and the galaxy listened. The stars had grown quiet, but the silence was not peace. It was the deep breath before a storm, the kind that shakes the skies and burns everything that stands in its way. After the first retaliation, the galaxy had watched Earth with new fear, unsure of what would come next. But humans did not rush. They moved like fire under ice, slow, careful, and unstoppable. On distant planets where Varnock officers had once walked with pride, shadows now moved differently. People whispered when human ships passed in the sky, and even the boldest criminals who had mocked Earth before now chose silence over laughter. Peace was still a word used in council meetings and political speeches, but it had changed. Now, peace did not mean avoiding war. It meant avoiding humanity's attention. Across systems, leaders who once cheered for the bombing of Haven 9 now burned their old flags and erased their speeches, hoping to disappear from human memory. But Earth remembered. It remembered everything. And forgiveness was not something it gave quickly. Human forces moved like a network of ghosts, reaching into dark corners of space where the guilty still hid. They didn't come with warnings or long speeches. They came with names, faces, and a quiet fury that burned deeper than any fire. The ships they used were not massive like the Varnock dreadnoughts. They were sleek, quiet, built for speed and precision. And inside them were soldiers trained in ways the galaxy had never seen. These were not warriors for war's sake. They were not seeking revenge just to feel power. They were delivering balance, one name at a time. They hunted warlords, corrupt leaders, and black market dealers who had profited from the bombing. Many tried to run. A few tried to fight. But none escaped, because humans did not stop until justice was served. Their path to peace was not built with treaties, it was carved in fire, name by name, across the stars. Meanwhile, the Varnock High Command fell apart from the inside. Fear had infected their leadership. Some blamed each other. Some called for surrender. Others still believed they could crush the humans with sheer numbers. But the problem was not numbers, it was spirit. The Varnock had weapons, fleets, and technology. But they lacked the one thing humanity now carried like a shield: unity. After Haven 9, every human, rich or poor, soldier or civilian, had come together with a single purpose. The world had changed, and so had its people. The Varnock, divided and unsure, could not match that. Their own allies began to drift away, unwilling to share their fate. Some even sent secret messages to Earth, offering support or information in exchange for mercy. Earth did not reply. It did not need to. Everyone already knew the burning path would continue until the last hand behind Haven 9 was turned to ash. And still, there were some who hoped for peace. On neutral planets, diplomats and scholars gathered to write new laws, desperate to stop what they feared would become full galactic war. But they understood something dangerous now. Peace could not be begged or forced, it had to be earned. And Earth had no interest in words. It wanted action. It wanted justice. It wanted truth. On the bridge of the command ship Silent Dawn, Admiral Kira Thorne watched the stars with eyes that no longer knew rest. She had not slept much since the bombing. Every night she replayed the footage. Every night she saw the children. And every mission she led now burned that memory deeper into her soul. She didn't speak about revenge. She spoke about balance. She spoke about protecting what was left. And her voice had become law among those who followed her. The path she walked was painful but necessary. Because in a galaxy where peace had become a lie, sometimes the only way forward was through fire. Human strike teams didn't just destroy, they rebuilt. After every operation, they left behind supplies, messages of warning, and offers of protection to innocent locales. Where fear once ruled, respect began to rise. Some called them angels of vengeance. Others called them monsters. But one thing became clear: Earth did not want to conquer. It only wanted justice. And that was what made it terrifying. Because even those who had not been part of the bombing now looked over their shoulders, wondering if they had ever wronged a human, even by accident. The burning path had made Earth powerful, not because of its weapons, but because of its will. And that kind of power could not be measured with numbers or size. It came from grief. It came from rage. And it came from love for the lost, the innocent, the forgotten. On the Varnock homeworld, chaos ruled the halls of power. Riots broke out in the cities. Soldiers deserted. Fear spread faster than any human ship could fly. And still, no human army landed there. Earth did not storm their planet with fire and thunder. It waited. Because it knew the Varnock were destroying themselves. All it had to do was watch. On distant moon bases and outposts, humans trained in silence, sharpening their skills, building alliances with species that had once mocked them. Now, those same species begged to be allies, hoping to avoid becoming targets. Earth listened carefully but trusted no one. Their peace would come, but it would be on their terms, not handed down by those who had looked away when Haven 9 burned. And so the path continued. Quiet, deadly, relentless. Wherever Earth's soldiers went, order followed. The galaxy changed city by city, orbit by orbit. Not because of fear alone, but because of the message behind the fire. A message that said, we do not forget, we do not forgive, and we do not allow harm without cost. The peace that spread across systems now carried a warning inside it, a glowing ember of memory that said peace could never again be taken for granted. It had to be protected, earned, and paid for. Earth had paid more than most. And now it was collecting what it was owed. The fires of war had burned across the stars, but as the smoke slowly faded, something strange began to take its place, not silence, not fear, but change. Where once there was only hatred, now there was understanding, though it came at a terrible price. The humans, once considered a weak and emotional species, had shattered that image forever. Their fury had been pure, focused, and unforgettable. The galaxy, which had once laughed at Earth, now looked to it with new eyes, some filled with respect, others with fear, and many with both. The bombing of Haven 9 had changed everything, not just for Earth, but for the entire universe. The destruction of innocent lives had awakened something in humanity that even they hadn't fully understood. Their grief had become a weapon, their love for their lost children had become armor, and their need for justice had become the engine that drove their fleets from one star to the next. But now, as the last targets were accounted for, and the final guilty were brought to justice or buried in silence, the question rose like smoke from the ashes. What comes next? Earth had not only avenged its dead, it had set a new standard for what it meant to be a part of this galaxy. The Varnock Empire had crumbled, broken by its own arrogance and the unbearable weight of humanity's response. Its allies had scattered, afraid of the storm they had helped create. Now they begged for peace, but Earth was no longer the same planet that once asked for fairness and diplomacy. It had become something harder, wiser, and far more dangerous. Yet within that hardened core, there was still hope. The same hands that had pulled triggers and launched strikes now reached out to rebuild. On planets once torn by war, human engineers planted food systems, repaired schools, and helped raise shelters. They did not ask for thanks. They did not raise flags. They simply worked, silently teaching the galaxy that Earth did not destroy for power, it destroyed to protect. And it would rebuild for the same reason. Slowly, cautiously, new alliances formed. Small species, once ignored by the mighty empires, now found safety beside Earth. Treaties were signed not in celebration, but in understanding. The humans spoke few words, but their presence was enough. No one forgot what had happened. No one would ever forget the sight of the Terran ships above broken battlefields, or the sound of their silent retribution moving through the dark. But they also remembered the hands that reached down after the fire had passed, the soldiers who offered water to children, the medics who saved enemy lives, and the commanders who chose justice over vengeance when the line between the two became thin. Humanity had shown its worst and best, and both had become part of its new place in the galaxy. In the great halls where old powers had once ruled, humans now sat at the same tables, not as guests, but as equals, or perhaps more. The future they had forged through fury was not one of conquest, but of balance. And though the fire had died down, the heat remained. It reminded everyone that peace was not free, that it came only when truth was faced and justice delivered. Earth did not preach, it acted. Its silence became a kind of law, more powerful than words. When Earth spoke now, even the most distant systems listened. They had seen what silence cost when they ignored the cries of Haven 9. They would not make that mistake again. And within humanity itself, a deeper change had taken place. They had learned their own strength, not just in ships and soldiers, but in unity. The bombing had been meant to break them, to scare them into submission. Instead, it had forged them into something greater. From the ashes of the orphaned, a generation of leaders, thinkers, and warriors had risen, people shaped not by fear, but by purpose. The galaxy would never return to what it was before. Too much had been lost. But from that loss, something better had begun to grow. A network of planets, protected not by force alone, but by a shared promise, never again. It wasn't written in stone. It wasn't enforced by fleets. It lived in memory, in the eyes of every survivor, in the quiet pride of every soldier who had walked the path of fire and returned not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. Humanity had paid a heavy price, but it had earned something priceless in return: respect. And perhaps, one day, forgiveness from others, and from itself. As the stars turned above, and peace slowly took root in places that had never known it, Earth watched, waited, and stayed ready. Not because it hoped for war, but because it would never again be unprepared. The fire had forged its future, and from that fire rose something more powerful than vengeance hope, protected by strength and a promise that echoed across the stars: never harm the innocent again. Not while humans remember.